Okay, I'm going to speak to you in English because the quality of my Thai is so bad that you wouldn't understand me. So if you don't mind, I'll speak English. Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizers, Chula Law and Thai CAN and others for including me here today. First, I'll give a little background in how we got involved with the Clean Air Act. So it was not as long as many of you, but in about October 2023, there was a draft Clean Air Management Act, and we made a translation. We made a detailed submission. We submitted it. I happened to be in a meeting with the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment about a week later, who said all the comments had been taken in and the version that was being promoted represented everybody's views in the community and we should all be happy. About a month later, there were 7 versions floating around. So the confidence in the process somehow didn't really work out. It was rushed. It was a very rushed consultation. Thanks to the hard work of many people here, there became one version, and that's gone through a process. And we are now aware of where that process is up to. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about why clean air is good for business. What are the essential elements in a law like this? I'm going to look very briefly at the OECD Responsible Business Conduct and other frameworks like the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to look at governance briefly, and then I'll take a different perspective, which is about personal accountability. You don't read about personal accountability in the OECD frameworks. It's all about organizational behavior. It's all about behaving in certain ways, and it's assumed that somehow companies and organizations are going to behave in certain ways. But what's under the hood in terms of personal accountability? What do leaders really think about when they're making decisions on behalf of large corporations or other organizations? So let me go forward. Who are we? The Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce in Thailand is 31 foreign chambers of commerce. We have about 8,000 company members in the end. We do a lot of advocacy, but also internal awareness. It's no secret that many of our members think that rule of law means law and order and police on the streets. So there's education that has to go on. There's education about human rights aspects, ILO, clean air. We are not a protectionist group which defends the direct interests of members, but we support fair competition, rule of law, anti-corruption, competitiveness, sustainable business, and good business practices. We are in our 50th year here in Thailand, and there's a nice little 50 logo you'll see on the top left. We have to have a logo. So, why is this important from our perspective? You see from the start I've talked about an economic necessity rather than a human rights angle. That does not mean that human rights is not important, but from a business perspective, we have pushed the economic necessity. Is the work environment healthy? It's not just about sick days, but overall workforce health and welfare. It's about productivity. Interestingly, whenever we see in the press discussions about base wage increases, 300 baht a day, 400 baht a day, there's barely a mention of productivity. Productivity isn't just about getting more out of people. It's growing human capital, growing skills, and growing human beings so that they have richer lives. In the AI world, we are very focused on human capital development. We have borrowed Dr. Fei-Fei Li's adage, AI should make us better human beings. So it's about human capital development. Business confidence, competitiveness, negative impacts on tourism, hospitality, retail, and local SMEs. And very importantly, investment attractiveness. We know what companies do when they're looking to invest in different places, and there are alternatives. Is the local environment healthy? Is it supporting a workforce? If you're an investor, those people are going to be your employees. Local companies may have alternatives as well. Foreign companies will do their due diligence. And then there's the issue of OECD accession and expectations. What should the essential elements be in a law like this? There should be a disincentive about polluting behavior, obviously. There should be incentives for change. We have to recognize this is about change, reducing polluting behavior, a fund to support the change, a polluter pays principle, effective governance with a workable balance. We seem to like having monster committees in legislation, but will they work? If they're dominated by ex officio government folks, typically they don't. Or if they're over-dominated by business with vested interests or narrow focus, then they're probably not going to work either. Effective provincial administration, because this is all about a nationwide effort. Ways to recognize and act on common issues. And then there's monitoring, reporting, and tracking tools, very important. Recognition that sectors need specialist ways to transform: transport, manufacturing, agriculture, energy, waste dumps, transboundary haze. And then transboundary and regional relevance. And then we have to recognize transition periods, community education, and phased introduction. We all know what responsible business conduct is. It's about making sure that the activities of business as investors are aligned with the needs of society today and the future. So this requires high standards of business innovation, investment, and operation. It's a lot about understanding new ways of working and how to bring technology into making sure we get the right outcomes. And then this is something that has fascinated me for a long time. We talk about ESG. What is the G in ESG? Is it different to the long history of corporate governance? Well, I don't think it's different. I think it's the current emphasis. So corporate governance evolved from shareholder interests only. The idea that directors had fiduciary duties to the company only, and they owed a responsibility to their direct shareholders, but not to a wider group of stakeholders. That has all evolved and changed. The modern corporation owes responsibility to a wide group of stakeholders, and there are much more sophisticated concepts of reflecting those interests. So when we look at enterprise governance, which might include organization types broader than corporations, but the same idea, a little over 20 years ago, the IT Governance Institute had its board briefing. It was educating boards about IT as a core function. So this was where boards would, when they were faced with an IT problem, they would hand it to the computer manager. They didn't take on the personal responsibility as directors of understanding this, and that's the point. So we go into other flavors of governance, AI governance, and then sustainability and ESG now. How many guiding minds, that is board directors and others who are in charge of organizations, take the personal responsibility to understand these things? It was IT 20 years ago, more recently AI governance and sustainability. Where does your sustainability officer sit in the company? There's a very interesting Harvard study on this. If the sustainability officer is in PR, then you're going to treat sustainability as a showcase thing. You are not going to treat it as a transformational piece. So there's evolution where you're seeing the sustainability officer becoming more and more central to the organization. So these are forces for change. Existing legislation. We have heard that we don't need this Clean Air Act because there's existing rules. Well, it really has to be about effective change, and our analysis is that we don't think that the existing rules, howsoever enforced, are really going to cut it. Interesting, the ASEAN Transboundary Haze Agreement took 10 years to close. Only one ASEAN member state, and it wasn't Thailand, really ever implemented effective domestic legislation. So what was so wrong with that thing? Well, it probably didn't have extraterritorial criminal reach, but it provided at least a framework for some mitigation and swapping information and monitoring. We shouldn't throw that out completely, but it doesn't have, it's not the answer obviously, but it's kind of a tool. This is a Bangkok Post editorial opinion piece from just in the last few days. Fake fathers and birth certificates, ill-gotten pink cards, civil service exam cheating, and nominees for predatory foreign business operation. The list goes on and on. How many more of these rackets have to be uncovered before such transgressions are seen as the single issue they are, a deeply ingrained disregard for security and sanctity of the nation? Instead of just security and sanctity of the nation, how about also doing the right thing by a wide group of stakeholders? But this is the kind of thing, not my problem. So what I'm going to look at now is the concept of personal accountability. Corporations and other organizations are still led by human beings, by people. The people who lead them have to have a sense of personal accountability. Very often we see that that's divorced. In other words, I'm a CEO of some big organization. I don't feel I have to have personal accountability for the outcome because I've got a board, I've got various committees, and we're going to decide this thing in the interest as we perceive it of our organization directly. What about that idea that your organization's interests might also include a wider group of stakeholders? Do we move from pure self-interest to something wider, or does that self-interest include that wider set? So the next few slides are a bit of a personal journey, but I thought it was the best way to illustrate it. This is the University of New South Wales School of Law and Justice, founded in 1971. It's not that old, but it has a reputation for law and justice. The banner outside says, "We will debate the big issues, defend those who can't defend themselves, and relish the challenges along the way. We will make a difference in this world." What I learnt there is that when you have a law degree, you potentially have great power, depending on what jobs you go into. You may be a lawyer, you may be a judge, you may be running an organization, you may be doing pro bono work, whatever it is. It's the question of how you exercise that power in any role, in any activity, which is the test of who you are. So amongst my peers and colleagues were people who became judges, people who became CEOs of very big banks, etc. By and large, the reputation of this institution has done well. I mention it not because it's a law school. I mention it because of the teaching of the idea of personal accountability. The law school has become ranked 12th globally in the QS rankings, and I think it's probably earned that because of its reputation in justice and the teaching of personal accountability. So another experience, a master's degree, change lives, change organizations, change the world. A sense of personal power and accountability. And you have to exercise this responsibly. So again, we are taught that we may be in positions of great authority and power. How do we exercise that? Do we do it responsibly or do we do it selfishly? This is a unique centre. It's based in Sydney, Australia. It's about 30 years old. It's called the Ethics Centre. The purpose, to bring ethics to the centre of everyday life. This organisation has done engagements, consulting advice, workshops, change with the top Australian 100 companies, government bodies in Australia, all armed forces in Southeast Asia, all Southeast Asian governments. What's the impact? It's teaching the concept of doing the right thing. When you are in a position of power as an individual, are you going to do the right thing? Are you going to make that organization move in a way that's responsible and are going to make you personally accountable? Or will you find a way to bury yourself behind a committee, a board, or something else and allege that what you're doing is in the interest of your members or direct stakeholders only? So what I've tried to do here is to suggest that what is missing in the concept of I'm not denigrating for 1 minute, don't get me wrong, but the concept of the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals or the OECD responsible business conduct is the idea of individual personal accountability and responsibility. And that's where I would suggest that this is a long-term thing, but we could all in the world, it's not only in Thailand, but we could all encourage that thinking a bit better. Interestingly, it does appear a bit stronger in the anti-corruption area because very often in that area, it's individual actions which are intended to be hidden and not discovered. So it comes down to individual actions. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert Park, for sharing insight with us today.